Hello and welcome back to 5 Minutes of Relevance. I just wanted to take some time out with you today to discuss the nomination race. I think that competition sometimes brings out the best and the worst in some people. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the people that were still left in the race. Super Tuesday challenged everything that we thought Super Tuesday used to be about, because usually we had a much clearer idea of who was going to lead the party. This time, Rick Santorum showed everyone that there is a myth created about electability, especially when there's involvement of money in campaigns that can be a negative thing. And I just kind of want to go on from there and get into each nominee a little bit. With Romney, we have a serious issue of where he's worked in the past with a company called Bain. And the problem with Bain is that Bain owns about 15 different companies that have essentially tried to buy the politics and our Congress in the process. Let me give you the names of several companies that you maybe never even thought were involved in politics or were involved in funding the majority of the political stuff that we see today. These are all Bain companies, and this is more than just one particular corporation. This is what we call a corporatocracy, where corporations are stacked on top of corporations. We have Dunkin' Donuts, Sports Authority, Guitar Center, Gymboree, Clear Channel, which is all your conservative talk show hosts basically, even radio stations like Project 961 and Eric Erickson especially, Houghton Mifflin, Domino's Pizza, The Weather Channel, Burger King, Sealy Mattresses, Brookstone, Burlington Coat Factory, Staples, Hospital Corporation of America, and D&M Holdings. And if you look at that list, you can see that they are companies that have created a product that almost encompass every aspect of someone's daily personal life. So when you buy something, you are actually giving someone power in a way that maybe you never even thought possible. So I want you to be mindful of that as we discuss the nomination race. Going back to the candidates, Romney tried to tell everyone that he was electable, and that was what was going to make him the front runner, that he was also going to be a clean sweep, uncontested for Super Tuesday, and that just did not happen. Romney's money and his brand of politics were not able to buy people. And unfortunately, you can't just buy people. In politics, there's actually real work involved, and there has to be solutions. Otherwise, we continually have statism and the status quo. I have had to come to my own personal decisions about my involvements with business, and at this time I choose to drop any association with NASCAR because I found out that Romney owns some NASCAR teams. And I say this because this is a serious abridgment of free speech. There was an issue where there was supposed to be a General Lee car in the race, and that didn't happen because Romney owns some teams, and Romney doesn't like Confederate flags, he doesn't like Southern heritage, and I think it is really wrong for NASCAR as a corporation to limit and ban free speech through their corporation because Romney said so. And I'm telling you that if you think Obama is bad, this guy is just the same as Obama. I also have a problem with Romney because of Ron Paul. I never thought that Ron Paul would be a sellout, but I find it very strange that Ron Paul has quite an association with Democrats. There were also dead people that voted in New Hampshire for Romney, and these people were put up to doing so by people that belonged to Ron Paul. And at the same time that was going on, Ron Paul followers were screaming, if Ron Paul doesn't get the nomination, then we're going to vote for Obama. I find this very weird that not only is all this money being pumped into the GOP nomination race from this company Bain, but that Bain has bet against the economy by also giving 1/10 of everything that the Democrats have gotten this nomination contest to them, meaning Obama's coffer, what Bain has given them is 10% of that coffer. You have to understand, being a lobbyist and looking at the different expense reports that I have to do myself and of other people's, there is a lot of money that changes hands, and it is not just what you see on paper. It is political favors, it is back scratching, it's in turn of food and invitations to events and all different kinds of things, which in and of itself is not particularly bribery. But Romney went to that point when, in Michigan, he had actually given people what we call lobbying amounts, up to the maximum amount of maybe $1,000 or $2,000, to get people to vote for him in the primary. I'm trying to tell you that we would like to think that the GOP is immune to stuff like this, but they're not. The GOP has been notorious for what I consider to be cutthroat tactics, and with that, I'm going to move on to Newt Gingrich. Newt Gingrich is also hooked in with Bain. I have read his books. I do not see the strategy of how he's going to get to $2.50 gas, and it's a campaign gimmick very much like the way Bachmann did when she garnered some success from the elderly when she said that she would try and get gas down to $2.50. Newt also says in his book that he wants to repeal and replace Obamacare, but he offers no legislation and no solution to it. Bain has also given $420,000 to the GOP itself. So you can see that no matter if Newt, Obama, or Romney win the election, that Bain gets all of their money back. Now let's move on to Ron Paul. Like I said before, I didn't think that Ron Paul was a sellout. However, this whole alignment with Romney is really disturbing. He's hooked in a way with him that at first it didn't really seem like they would have anything to do with each other. I don't think that Ron Paul would ever win the nomination contest for the presidency because he's a libertarian. And he works with Democrats, which is something that most people who support the GOP tend to distrust. I don't understand either his in the Fed theory. Because to me, if we were to end the Federal Reserve, that would make Ron Paul king for 4 years. These philosophies and ideas are not particularly what conservatives hold dear, and I'm going to get into that. Rick Santorum's campaign has done incredibly well. This past 9 months has been absolutely engaging as far as changing our country around. And by far and large, this has to do with Rick Perry and Rick Santorum. With Rick Perry's exit from the race, many conservative people latched on to Rick Santorum, and for very good reason. Romney's slander is not helping our economy, and it's not helping our country. But Rick Santorum's ideas and solutions will. A lot of us have looked into what he plans to do with corporate tax reform, and for small business owners, we give that a thumbs up. I also see that in order to create sustainable and long-term employment, that we have to at least tackle some sort of tax reform, because what mainly caused the deficit was the rich not paying their taxes, their annual 20% of their total gross income, because many people were involved in money-making schemes. They accrued a lot of losses, and I'm going to get into that later. I just want to issue a statement from the Tea Party in general. While Washington has heard the responses of their governance through various events, either by regular constituencies, by Republican and Democrat and state governors, and the more vocal and visible Tea Party folks and occupiers, Congress will now feel the opinion rather than just hear it, with actions taken by the consumer to address the inflation created by the wealthy failing to pay an annual 20% of their income, of their gross income, to the IRS, who caused the deficit and the borrowing, with the cascade of economic effects from inefficient and incompetent governance, which has been steadily building over the past 10 years. Consumers have no choice but to adjust their spending habits and family debts due to prolonged unemployment and government being intrusive and an obstacle to economic growth. There are 4 conservative principles that we need to talk about: working, saving, investing, and creating jobs. The main problem that conservatives have with Obama is after he was elected by many people who did not vote for him, and dead people in Mickey Mouse voting for him, and other allegations of serious voter fraud and misrepresentation of candidacy, was that we don't see Obama doing any of those things of conservative principles, and that this is a fruit of him not having any citizenship. The unemployment is much higher because we have not added jobs at a rate of 200,000 a month for the past 3 years to keep up with the amount of unemployment that we have had over that time. When 25 or 30 million people lose their jobs, it is very difficult for them to find their way, and Obama has done nothing but increase the deficit and not create employment. And the reason I believe is because he does not have citizenship here, so he does not understand the currency, he does not understand the laws. Just because he went to school at Harvard and he studied books and all this and got a degree does not necessarily mean he understands the culture and the way that people spend money and what drives the economy. Now that we have discussed that, I want to discuss how to correct inflation. When it comes to borrowing so much money from the Chinese, you have to understand that when you spend $20, it pays the Chinese $15. They only profit $5 off every $15 you spend. So essentially it will take a really long time to pay back the Chinese what we owe them if we do not make some other adjustments in our spending. If you spend $10, it's like paying the Chinese $7.50. So it only profits them $2.50. And if you spend $5, it's like paying the Chinese $3.75, and it only profits the Chinese $1.25. For $1, which is what we've talked about, the debasing of the value of currency, it pays the Chinese $2.50, but the Chinese do not make a profit off of it. They make a loss of $1.50. So if you say that you were to subtract that, it would equal a full dollar, but it would be for them. The Chinese, basically by letting us borrow so much money from them, essentially own the dollar bill, and it's red because we're in a deficit. Now I want to go on to how to correct inflation, and we're going to talk about that by use of the gold standard being backed by a silver standard issue. And basically what that means is the gold in the treasury, what value does it represent? It's a set amount, and it will be because the silver is backing the gold, because silver has always retained its same value, pretty much $1 per gram of silver. Okay. Now that we have discussed that, I want to talk about how we fix the inflation problem. The value of the dollar itself, if you were to look at it like this, 10% of the dollar that you hold in your hand goes to the church, 20% of it goes to the government and the inflation issue, and 40% is spent on defense. By the time that is all said and done, it is really 70% of the value of the dollar being gone. So when you get your paycheck, you have to understand that 70% of every dollar that you get paid is gone. And it goes to those directions. Either the church and charity, government and inflation, and defense spending, because we borrowed so much against the dollar. That means that what you have in your wallet, if you have a dollar bill, it's only worth 33 cents. If you have a $5 bill, it is only worth $1.33. And if you have a $10 bill, it is only worth $3.33. And if you have a $20 bill, it's worth $6.66. These are very important figures that you should think about when you're spending your money, and how you should plan on spending your money and how to save. And if you look at also the currency exchanges in relation to our debt with the Chinese, you can see why there is a huge concern, because it is almost as if we have not only had to leverage everything in the Treasury to pay back that debt, but half of what we really hold and value for what we get paid actually goes to them. It's very important that you understand and reflect on inflation and how you spend your money. The way I got these figures was that I determined, after doing a Treasury audit, what the gold standard should actually be in relation to silver. And I don't mean as a commodity. I don't mean when you pull up the price of gold that it's inflated and blah 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 and count that as what's in the Treasury, because it's not true. We have to go by what's real silver in order to have a price for gold. And I want you to think about how you spend your money and the effect of what kind of politics you get, because now that we have thought that corporations were the way, which is what we were taught post-90s, many of us have spent the past 10 or 15 years thinking that we were going to get past what we had experienced with government before, because we were going to work our way out of it. And in a way, we actually worked our way into greater inflation because of how we didn't manage our money and because of how we didn't manage our government. I wanted to give you this knowledge because I want you to be able to survive, and I want it to be able to get us out of this recession so that we can reduce the inflation. Because if we reduce the inflation, then we'll have the job growth that we need, and we'll be able to set the course of our future in the right direction. Thank you for listening to me today, and I hope you put what I've said into practice.